You have been losing power your entire life, and the most dangerous part is this. You never even noticed when the wound began. Every time you answered someone who did not deserve your words, you gave them a piece of yourself. Every time you explained your heart to people already determined to misunderstand you, you placed your emotions in their hands. Every time you rushed to defend your name, your choices, your silence, your boundaries, you taught the world one brutal truth about you. You can be moved, and the man who can be moved can be controlled. This is what weak men never learn, and powerful men never forget. Your attention is not cheap. It is not casual. It is not something to scatter like dust in the wind. It is the most expensive currency you possess, more valuable than your time, because where your attention goes, your life follows. And too many men spend it on people who would never bleed for them, never stand for them, never even cross the street to save them. Machiavelli understood this long before most men understood themselves. The ruler who chases loses stature. The ruler who reacts loses mystery. The ruler who needs to be heard has already surrendered the advantage. Tonight, you learn the art that separates kings from beggars. Not the loud art of domination, not the childish theater of revenge. Something colder, something colder. The ruthless mastery of ignoring people. And once you understand it, once you embody it, very few people will ever control your emotions again. Machiavelli did not study fantasy. He studied men, princes, popes, generals, traitors, cowards, opportunists. He watched entire systems rise on discipline and collapse under vanity. He understood something most men still refuse to accept. Fairness is not what governs power. Results do, and the results always reveal the same pattern. The man who is too available becomes ordinary. The man who explains too much becomes smaller. The man who responds to every insult exposes insecurity. The man who answers every critic looks defensive. But the man who sits still, who lets noise die in the air, who refuses to descend into every petty conflict offered to him, that man becomes difficult to read. And what cannot be read cannot be easily controlled. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is a message. It says you are not important enough to disturb my peace. It says your presence has not earned access to my energy. It says I am operating at a level your chaos cannot reach. That is why true power rarely shouts. It does not beg to be understood. It does not race to justify itself. It stands. It watches. It lets the restless expose themselves. Most men cannot do this. Most men live like dogs, chasing every passing noise. Every insult gets a reaction. Every slight gets an explanation. Every challenge gets an emotional response. They exhaust themselves trying to prove they are strong while proving the exact opposite. Because the easiest man to manipulate is the man who must react. The easiest man to provoke is the man whose ego is always within arm's reach of a stranger. You will not be that man. Power is quiet. Power does not over-explain. Power does not ask permission to exist. It simply exists, and the world adjusts to it. The moment you understand the philosophy of silence, you stop playing games designed by weaker minds. You stop running across a chessboard someone else laid for your downfall. You stop accepting invitations into meaningless wars. In your world, not everything deserves engagement. Not everything deserves closure. Not everything deserves your words. And that is where the real shift begins. Because the moment you ignore someone strategically, something happens inside their mind. This is where dark psychology becomes visible. When a person expects access to you and suddenly loses it, their mind does not stay calm. It begins searching, replaying, interpreting, doubting. They revisit your last words, your last look, your last silence. They study the distance you created as if it contains a hidden sentence they failed to read. Why? Because being ignored does not feel neutral. It feels like pain. Human beings are wired for acknowledgement, for response, for emotional confirmation. Even conflict can satisfy that hunger, because conflict still says, you matter enough to affect me. But silence says something colder. Silence says, you no longer reach me, and for most people, that is unbearable. They feel it in the chest, in the stomach, in the tension of sleepless thought. They begin rehearsing conversations that will never happen, drafting messages they may never send, building explanations for a silence they cannot force open. They wake up thinking about the one person who did not give them what they expected. Your absence becomes louder than their noise. That is the psychological weight of indifference. The human mind can tolerate anger more easily than dismissal. Anger still offers contact. Anger still recognizes significance. But indifference strips people of that comfort. It leaves them standing in a void, face to face with the possibility that they no longer matter in your inner world. And that possibility creates obsession. They will try harder. They will shift behavior. They will seek signs. They will question themselves. They will feel smaller than they did before they crossed you. All of this can happen while you do nothing at all. That is what weak men never understand. They think power is in the perfect comeback, the final message, the cutting line, the dramatic exit. But real power often requires no speech. Real power is the ability to withdraw your attention and let another person feel the full weight of losing access to you. This is not cruelty for entertainment. This is not emotional sadism. This is understanding human behavior well enough to stop volunteering your energy to people who misuse it. Weak men beg for attention. Strong men understand the force of withholding it. When someone has wronged you, disrespected you, lied to you, used you, manipulated you, or treated your presence as disposable, you do not owe them closure. Closure is not a right. Closure is a gift, and many people have done nothing to earn it. So what do you give them instead? Nothing. And sometimes nothing is the most devastating answer of all, because the greatest punishment is not revenge. Revenge still keeps you emotionally tied to the person who disturbed your peace. Revenge says, you still occupy space inside me. But irrelevance is colder. Irrelevance is cleaner. Irrelevance tells them they no longer qualify for your thought, your words, your anger, or your effort. That is a different level of power. That is where ignoring becomes a form of self-respect. And the deeper truth is this: the one who cannot be baited becomes dangerous in a way noise never can. A loud man is easy to study. A reactive man is easy to predict. But a silent man with standards, discipline, and emotional control becomes a problem for anyone who hoped to manipulate him, because they cannot locate the button. They press, but nothing happens. They provoke, but nothing moves. They return, but the gate stays closed. And when a manipulator loses access to your reactions, they lose their map of you. This is why silence unsettles people so deeply. It takes away their leverage. It denies them the emotional material they need to keep control. It forces them into uncertainty. And uncertainty is where weak minds begin to unravel. Remember that. Not everyone deserves your explanation. Not everyone deserves your defense. Not everyone deserves another chance to hear your voice. Some people deserve the echo of their own behavior. Some people deserve distance. Some people deserve to become strangers to your peace. And once you truly understand this, your life begins to change in ways most men never experience. You become more selective, more measured, more deliberate. You stop reacting on impulse. You stop trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop feeding people access they have not earned. And that is only the beginning. Because ignoring people is not just about silence. It is about control. It is about the discipline to choose where your energy goes and where it dies. It is about becoming the kind of man whose presence has weight, because it is no longer available to everyone. If this truth is already cutting through the noise in your mind, stay with psychology of power, because what comes next goes deeper. Now we move from silence as a weapon into the art of strategic withdrawal, where presence itself becomes leverage. There is a difference between disappearing because you are wounded and withdrawing because you are in command. One is collapse, the other is power. Most men confuse the two Because most men have never learned how to leave without looking broken. They vanish in pain. They retreat in confusion. They go silent because they are overwhelmed, not because they are composed. But strategic withdrawal is something else entirely. It is not emotional retreat. It is disciplined distance. It is the decision to stop scattering your presence across every conversation, every argument, every demand, every petty drama begging for your attention. The man who masters this art is still in the room, but no longer emotionally available to everyone inside it. He looks at people, but does not offer them access. He hears the noise, but does not invite it into his mind. He remains physically present while becoming psychologically unreachable. That is not something you perform, that is something you become. Strategic withdrawal means you choose where your energy goes. You choose where your presence lands. You choose which moments deserve your mind and which ones deserve your absence. You no longer live like an open gate for anyone with a voice, a need, a complaint, or a crisis. You become selective. You become measured. You become expensive. And that changes everything. Most men exhaust themselves by being too available. They answer every call. They respond to every message. They engage every provocation. They explain every silence. They rush to clear misunderstandings that were never innocent in the first place. Then they wonder why they feel drained, disrespected, ordinary. It is because what is always available is rarely valued. Common is the enemy of power. The moment people know they can always reach you, always pull from you, always access you, your presence loses weight. You become predictable, easy, familiar in the worst way. But when you become selectively absent, something shifts. Your presence begins to gather gravity. Your silence begins to create questions. Your restraint begins to create value. Because what is rare is always desired. This is one of the cold laws of human nature. People do not chase what is constantly pouring itself into their hands. They chase what they fear losing. They chase what they cannot fully read. They chase what withholds itself with calm confidence. So practice this with discipline. Let some calls go unanswered. Let some messages sit. Let some people wonder where you are, what you are doing, and why your energy no longer arrives on command. Do not do it like a child playing games. Do it like a man reclaiming ownership of himself. Mystery has more power than explanation ever will. The less you announce, the more people project. The less you reveal, the more they study you. The less access you give, the more your presence grows in their mind. Emotional unavailability is not about cruelty for sport. It is not about becoming robotic, bitter, or empty. It is about protecting your inner world from those who have not earned the right to enter it. Your attention is sacred. Your thoughts are sacred. Your emotional balance is sacred. These are not public resources. These are private territories. And only those who prove themselves worthy should ever be allowed near them. Everyone else meets the wall. And here is the truth that makes weak men uncomfortable. Most people will never understand your wall until they are the reason it had to be built. The less you give, the more they want. The more you withdraw, the harder they chase. The more you stop performing emotional labor for others, the more your value becomes visible. You are not disappearing, you are ascending. And from that elevation, the noise below begins to sound what it really is. Small, desperate, unworthy, meaningless. That is when you start to see clearly who deserves your silence. And who deserves even less than that. Not everyone deserves your words. In truth, most people do not even deserve your silence. They deserve nothing at all. Learn to identify them without hesitation. The first are your enemies. These are the ones who actively work against you. They smile in your face and poison your name in private. They hope to provoke you, weaken you, distract you, pull you into conflict where your emotions do their work for them. They want your reaction because your reaction validates their importance. Never give them that gift. The moment you respond to an enemy with visible emotion, you elevate them. You tell the world they matter enough to disturb your peace. But when you ignore them completely, something humiliating happens. They lose shape. they lose significance. They become shadows fighting against the sun, swinging wildly at a man who will not descend to meet them. That is how enemies are starved, not always with attack, sometimes with absence. The second are the critics. These are the people who build nothing, create nothing, risk nothing, yet somehow always have enough energy to tear down what others are trying to build. They sit in the cheap seats of life and scream at the men on the field. They offer judgment instead of courage, commentary instead of contribution. Responding to critics is one of the fastest ways to shrink yourself, because the moment you stop your forward motion to wrestle with every voice in the crowd, you leave your path and enter theirs. You trade progress for noise. You lower yourself to defend your worth before people who were never qualified to measure it. Let them talk, let them spit, let them invent whatever version of you helps them sleep at night. Their words dissolve into air. Your actions carve stone. The third are the energy vampires. These are the most dangerous because they do not always arrive like enemies. They often come disguised as friends, as wounded souls, as people who just need support, just need to vent, just need a little more of your time. But every interaction leaves you lighter in the worst way, emptier, foggier, more distracted from your mission. They feed on your focus. They feed on your emotional bandwidth. They feed on your availability. And because they do not always look malicious, men keep excusing them. They call it loyalty. They call it kindness. They call it being there for people. No. A parasite is still a parasite even when it speaks softly. Cut them off without ceremony. You do not owe endless access to people who consume your spirit. You do not owe an explanation to people who have made a habit of draining your peace. You do not owe your life force to anyone whose chaos keeps multiplying inside your world. Understand this deeply. Every reaction you give to unworthy people is energy stolen from your purpose. Every moment spent feeding their noise is a moment taken from your growth, your discipline, your future, your greatness. The powerful man does not fight every battle placed in front of him. He chooses his wars with precision and lets the rest burn themselves out. Your silence is not passive. Your silence is a decision. Your silence is a border. Your silence is the loudest thing you will ever say to people who no longer deserve access to you. And this is where the next test begins. Because understanding silence is easy. Living it when your pride is wounded is another matter entirely. Now we move into the hardest discipline of all. How to feel the sting, the disrespect, the provocation, and still remain untouchable. This is where most men break. Not when life is easy, not when they feel admired, not when the room is quiet and no one is pressing against their pride. They break in the moment of impact. In the second when disrespect lands, when betrayal burns, when someone lies, humiliates, dismisses, mocks, or tries to provoke them in front of others. Because strategy is easy in theory, discipline is war in practice. The insult will sting, the disrespect will burn. Your body will beg for movement, your ego will scream for retaliation. Every nerve in you will demand an answer, a defense, a correction. Some immediate act that proves you are not weak, not blind, not someone to be played with. And that is exactly why weak men lose. Not because they do not understand the game, because they cannot master themselves inside the moment. They know silence is powerful, but they cannot survive the heat required to hold it. So they speak too soon. They explain too much. They defend themselves to people who were never judging fairly in the first place. They hand over their emotional state in exchange for a few seconds of relief, and then wonder why they feel smaller afterward. Because reaction gives relief, but restraint builds power. You must understand that clearly. The goal is not to become numb. The goal is to become unreachable at the level where most people try to control you. This is not emotional death. It is emotional command. The Stoics understood it. They spoke of a state where outside events could strike the surface without conquering the center. A man could feel the world without being ruled by it. He could witness insult without surrendering his throne. That is what you must build. An inner fortress, not made of pride, made of discipline, when someone disrespects you, do not rush. Pause. Let the first wave hit. Feel the anger rise in the chest. Feel the heat in the jaw. Feel the instinct to answer. Then do nothing. Breathe once. Breathe again. Let the feeling move through you without turning into speech. Do not clench your fists. Do not sharpen your face. Do not let your eyes expose the wound. Become still. Become stone. This is where power begins to take shape inside a man. Not when he talks about control, but when he chooses it while every part of him wants release. Practice it with small moments first. A rude comment, a dismissive tone, a text meant to bait you, a passive insult wrapped in humor, a social slight designed to test your frame. These are training grounds. These are not interruptions to your development. They are your development. Every time you refuse to react on impulse, you strengthen something invisible and deadly. Every time you hold your center, your nervous system learns a new law. I do not move because others pull. That is when you stop being predictable. That is when you stop being easy to manipulate. That is when you stop being a puppet. The man who cannot control his reactions is owned by whoever can trigger them. Anyone can pull his strings. Anyone can disturb his focus. Anyone can redirect his energy with the right insult, the right doubt, the right bout, withdrawal of approval. He may call himself strong. He may speak with force. He may even look intimidating. But if other people can control his emotions at will, then his power is an illusion. Real power is quieter than that. Real power is the ability to remain unmoved while others lose themselves trying to move you. Imagine the difference. A weak man hears disrespect and instantly attacks. A powerful man hears disrespect and studies. A weak man feels the pressure and leaks emotion. A powerful man feels the pressure and becomes colder. A weak man needs to prove. A powerful man needs only to decide. That is the gap. And the wider that gap becomes, the more untouchable you become. There will be days when you fail. There will be moments when the old reflex wins. You will send the message you should have deleted. You will answer the provocation you should have let die. Good, that is part of the forge. This discipline is not natural. It is built through repetition, through awareness, through the humiliation of seeing your own emotional habits clearly and refusing to keep living inside them. Every time you regain control after losing it, you become stronger. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you add iron to your spine. Every time you walk away from drama, you rise above the men still drowning in it. Eventually, something changes. What used to provoke you no longer reaches you. What used to shake you now reveals itself as small. What used to control you now exhausts itself against your indifference. And that is when the next layer of mastery opens. Because once you can control your reactions, you begin to see social life for what it really is. A chessboard. Most people never realize they are playing. They move emotionally, impulsively, exposing every intention in the open. They rush to defend every square, answer every attack, react to every threat, and they lose because they are always moving on someone else's terms. But the man who understands power sees something different. He knows the greatest move is often no move at all. When you ignore someone strategically, you force them into motion. You make them come closer. You make them explain themselves. You make them seek your response, your approval, your acknowledgement. The frame shifts, the rhythm changes, the center of gravity moves toward you. This is true in every arena. In relationships, the one who cares less controls more of the emotional temperature. That does not mean becoming cruel. It means becoming whole enough that you do not beg for reassurance, chase every silence or panic when distance appears. The moment you stop needing constant confirmation, your presence changes. You stop leaning. You stop pleading. You stop shrinking to avoid loss. And people feel that immediately. They begin to orbit what is stable. In business, the man who appears unaffected by the outcome often wins the negotiation. Desperation has a scent. Neediness has a posture. The person who has to close the deal today usually pays the highest price. But the one who can walk away calmly, the one who does not tremble at the thought of losing the opportunity. That person changes the table without raising his voice, because calm signals options, and options are power. In social hierarchies, the person who does not seek approval rises above those who live for it. While others perform, you remain composed. While others gossip, posture, compete, and scramble for attention, you stand apart. You do not need to win every room. You do not need everyone to like you. You do not need to be constantly seen to be deeply felt. In fact, the less you chase visibility, the more people notice your gravity. That is social power at its highest level. You do not win by capturing every piece. You win by controlling the board with minimal effort. You win by making others exhaust themselves while you conserve your energy. You win by becoming difficult to read, difficult to provoke, difficult to manipulate. And if this way of seeing the world is beginning to sharpen something inside you, remember where that edge is being forged. Psychology of power is not here to entertain your ego. It is here to train your frame, to make you calmer under pressure, quieter under attack, and more dangerous through self-command than most men could ever be through noise. The game is always being played. The only question is whether you are the hand moving the pieces or the piece being moved. And this is the trap that destroys most men long before any enemy ever does. They care too much about how they are seen, too much about whether they are liked, too much about whether someone understood them, respected them, approved of them, agreed with them, praised them, chose them, or spoke well of them when they left the room. They wake up replaying conversations like prisoners reviewing evidence. They go to sleep measuring their worth against the mood of people who have done nothing to earn that power over them. That is not awareness, that is slavery. The moment another person can raise or lower your emotional state with a compliment, a cold look, a delayed reply, a criticism, or a shift in tone, you are no longer free. You may appear calm on the outside, but your center has already been handed away. You are living from the reactions of others. You are borrowing identity from unstable hands, and unstable hands will always drop you. This is why so many men feel exhausted without understanding the source of their exhaustion. They think life is heavy. They think the world is too demanding. They think their problem is stress. But the deeper truth is uglier than that. Too many people have access to their inner world. Too many voices can enter. Too many opinions can wound. Too many strangers can shape the temperature of their mind. One insult ruins their day. One cold message ruins their focus. One moment of rejection makes them question their worth. One room of disapproval makes them betray their own instincts. That is not power. That is dependency disguised as social intelligence. Machiavelli understood this weakness with brutal clarity. A prince who needs to be loved by everyone becomes a servant to everyone. A prince who fears being disliked will govern from anxiety, not strategy. He will soften when he should stand firm. He will explain when he should remain silent. He will seek approval when he should command respect. And little by little, his need to be accepted will destroy the very authority he hoped to protect. That same law governs modern men. The need for approval is the death of power. And the darkest part is this: most of that need was planted in you before you were old enough to question it. From childhood, you were trained to seek validation, rewarded for obedience, praised for the right answer, corrected for disruption, conditioned to read the faces of others as measurements of your value. School sharpened it, society deepened it, relationships disguised it as love. Over time, you stopped asking what was true and began asking what would be accepted. That is how the chain was built, not in a single moment, in 1,000 small moments. A nod from a teacher, approval from a parent, acceptance from a crowd, attention from someone you desired. And now many men spend their entire lives still chasing those same signals in adult form. They tailor their words to avoid judgment. They censor their instincts to avoid rejection. They overgive to avoid abandonment. They perform calm while starving for confirmation. No wonder they feel hollow. A man who needs validation can be bribed with praise. A man who fears criticism can be controlled through shame. A man who depends on approval will always betray himself eventually, because pressure will always find the place where he is still hungry. That is why this chain must be broken, not later. Now, start by noticing it. Notice the moment you change your tone to win approval. Notice the moment you hesitate because you fear what someone might think. Notice the impulse to explain yourself to people who have not earned explanation. Notice the craving to be seen in the right light by those who contribute nothing to your life. See it clearly. Do not justify it. Do not romanticize it as sensitivity. Name it dependence. Then begin cutting it. Each time you act without seeking permission, the chain weakens. Each time you speak truth without chasing applause, the chain weakens. Each time you let someone misunderstand you without collapsing into explanation, the chain weakens. Each time you stop negotiating your worth with the outside world, the chain weakens. This is liberation in real time. The powerful man is not the man who feels nothing. He is the man who is no longer governed by things that do not matter. He cares deeply, but selectively. He cares about his mission. He cares about his standards. He cares about his growth, his legacy, his code, his direction. But he does not care about the random opinions of the uninvested, the bitter, the manipulative, the petty, the weak, or the irrelevant. That difference changes a life, because once you stop needing approval, the world loses one of its easiest ways to control you. Praise cannot buy you. Criticism cannot break you. Distance cannot panic you. Rejection cannot define you. You begin to operate from an internal compass. And an internal compass is terrifying to those who survive by moving others through guilt, urgency, confusion, and emotional pressure. They cannot turn you as easily. They cannot bait you as easily. They cannot own your nervous system the way they once did. This is what freedom actually looks like. Not chaos, not rebellion for show, not arrogance. Sovereignty, a kingdom within. There is a territory inside you that belongs to no one else. Your thoughts are your land. Your attention is your gold. Your emotions are your subjects. Your standards are your laws. And every time you let the outside world dictate what happens inside that kingdom, you commit treason against yourself. No more. Everything you have learned leads here. The silence, the withdrawal, the refusal to chase, the discipline of indifference, the rejection of approval addiction. All of it converges into one transformation. You are becoming untouchable. Not because nobody will ever test you, they will. Not because nobody will ever try to provoke you, they will. Not because life will stop applying pressure, it will not. You become untouchable because fewer and fewer people can reach the place where your peace lives. You become untouchable because your center is no longer sitting in their hands. You become untouchable because you stop outsourcing your state to unstable people and unstable circumstances. That changes the way you walk. That changes the way you speak. That changes the way you enter rooms and leave them. People feel it before you explain anything. They sense that you are no longer available in the old way. They sense that your silence means something now. They sense that your attention has weight. They sense that you are seen through the illusions that keep ordinary men emotionally exposed and easy to move. You do not compete for attention. You let attention find you. You do not argue with fools. You let silence defeat them. You do not chase validation. You build identity from within. This transformation does not happen overnight. It is forged through repetition, through restraint, through moments where the old version of you wanted to react and the new version refused. Every time you chose silence over impulse, you added iron to your frame. Every time you walked away from chaos, you rose. Every time you let someone scream into the emptiness of your indifference, you proved you were no longer living at the level where they could reach you. The untouchable man is not cold for the sake of performance. He is selective. He gives warmth where warmth is earned. He gives loyalty where loyalty is proven. He gives words when words matter. He gives energy only to battles aligned with his purpose. Everything else receives distance. This is the final truth. The man who can be emotionally manipulated will eventually be strategically defeated. But the man who needs less, explains less, reacts less, and guards his attention like treasure becomes difficult to stop. You are not becoming heartless. You are becoming sovereign. From this day forward, you do not react just because you were provoked. You do not explain yourself to people who already chose misunderstanding. You do not chase what runs from you. You do not spend your best energy on those who would not spend a minute protecting yours. You speak less. You observe more. You engage only when it serves your purpose. You let the noise of the world fade into background static while you build what actually matters. Your discipline, your mind, your future, your legacy. And the people who once controlled your emotions will feel the difference. They will test you. They will provoke you. They will try to pull you back into the old patterns. But you will not move. You will give them nothing. Not your anger, not your frustration, not even your need to be understood. Let them become ghosts, trying to haunt a man who no longer believes in their power. This is the ruthless art that separates the respected from the used, the sovereign from the manipulated, the dangerous from the desperate. Now you know. Use it with discipline. Use it with strategy. Use it to build an empire inside yourself that no outside force can easily invade. And if this awakens something sharp inside you, let that be your signal to stay close to this channel. There is more power in disciplined silence, psychological control and self-mastery than most men will ever discover by accident. Mark this moment. Commit to it. Return to it until it becomes your nature. Your reign begins now. Go forward differently, quieter, colder, clearer, untouchable.